TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. A light drizzle fell over the moss-draped oaks lining the brick streets of downtown Savannah, Georgia, as three lifelong friends gathered inside Spanish moss roasters. Warm amber light spilling from the tall windows painted long reflections on the wet pavement. Inside, the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans mingled with hints of cocoa and toasted pecans. A single barista, her purple-streaked hair tucked under a faded baseball cap, worked the espresso machine with quiet intensity. At a corner table near the bay window sat Landon Turner, his sandy brown hair damp from the rain, dressed in a charcoal gray peacoat that accentuated broad shoulders and a lean frame. Across from him lounged Jax Reynolds, confidently swinging one leg over the other, his dark eyes alight with mischief as he cradled a steaming mug of hot chocolate. To Jax's right, River Matthews, the most soft-spoken of the trio, stirred his chai latte in contemplative silence. They had known each other since elementary school, sharing lazy summer afternoons fishing by the Savannah River, swapping comic books in middle school hallways, and navigating the awkward hall of East Broad High together. Tonight, the usually easy camaraderie crackled with a different energy. Jax leaned forward, lowering his voice even though no one else was near. "All right, Landon," he said, voice rich with challenge. "You remember that new stylist at Azalea and Company?" He flicked his chin toward the storefront across the street, its neon sign a soft pink glow through the rain-speckled glass. "Her name's Aurelia Hayes. She's got that effortless style, something about the way she layers fabrics, like she's painting with clothes instead of colors." Landon followed Jax's gaze. Through the shop's rain-dappled window, he could just make out a slender figure arranging vintage dresses on a rack. Long auburn hair was pulled into a loose braid, and Landon caught a glimpse of her profile, high cheekbones, a gentle curve of her lips, an aura of quiet confidence. River set down his latte, leaning in too. "She's amazing," he added softly. "And she's got that look, like she's been through things most people can't even imagine." Jax grinned, showing a flash of white. "So here's the deal. If you can get her to agree to, let's say, a coffee date, or even just to let you help carry her bags, in 7 days, we'll each chip in and get you a trip to New Orleans. Jazz, beignet, a whole weekend in the French Quarter." He paused, letting the idea sink in. "Think you can do it?" Landon raised an eyebrow. He had never been one for dares. He was practical, methodical, more law student than game player. But tonight, watching the way the rain traced slow rivers down the window pane, something in him stirred. Maybe it was the hushed excitement in Jax's voice. Or maybe it was the memory of all the times he'd chosen caution over chance. He set down his own mug of black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and looked straight at Jax. "A weekend in New Orleans, huh?" He let a slow smile cross his face, careful and deliberate. "I accept." River let out a soft whistle. "Just coffee." Landon clarified.
no ridiculous stunts.
No toast-on-a-roof antics. Just genuine conversation. Jax raised his mug in salute. "Genuine conversation. I like it." He glanced at the window again. "She's good at what she does, Landon. But I think you're the kind of guy who notices details no one else sees." Landon felt heat rise in his cheeks. He was used to solving problems, drafting arguments for moot court, or navigating case law. He wasn't used to being told, he was observant, in a way that felt personal. River cleared his throat. "All right, gents. We have a deal. But remember, it's about more than bragging rights. If there's one thing I've learned living in Savannah, it's that real connections don't happen by accident. If you dive in, you dive all the way." Landon nodded, running a hand through damp hair. "I know." He glanced at the clock above the barista station, 6:15 p.m. 7 days started now. Jax winked. "I'll expect a full report in my inbox, complete with screenshots if you must." But more importantly, I want to see sparks, buddy. Show us you're actually interested.
Outside.
The rain slowed to a hush. The three friends sat for a moment, mug against mug, each caught in the electric tension of something new unfolding. They were closer than ever, united by a dare. Yes, but also by the unspoken promise that for Landon, everything had just changed. As Landon watched Aurelia disappear behind the boutique's rain-streaked glass, his heart thumped with something he hadn't felt in years. Genuine anticipation. Not for the trip to New Orleans. Not even for the dare itself. But for the chance to discover something real. Hidden in plain sight behind her gentle smile. And so began the 7-day challenge that would test more than Landon's nerves. It would challenge the very way he opened his heart. Aurelia Hayes grew up under the heavy boughs of cypress and live oak that draped the grounds of Cypress Hollow Monastery, a place of quiet refuge just beyond Charleston's city limits. The monastery sat on a gentle rise, its whitewashed walls tinged with green moss, a sanctuary for weary souls and lost spirits alike. To most visitors it appeared timeless, rows of orange poppies along the main walkway, the melody of a lone choir practicing in the chapel, the faint scent of incense drifting through arched windows. But to those who called Cypress Hollow home, it was both shelter and reminder of lives marked by tragedy. Aurelia's earliest memories were woven with whispered prayers and the rustle of habit-clad figures. She arrived at the monastery at age 5, clutching a worn leather suitcase and a single rag doll. Her mother, Madame Celeste Duval, had been a celebrated fashion editor in New York, sharp-witted, impeccably dressed, and admired by anyone who crossed her path. Yet beneath that silken satin veneer lurked a secret love that would shatter Celeste's world. She had fallen desperately for a man already married, a high-powered executive with a reputation for discretion and charm. When Celeste discovered she was pregnant, she believed her passion could rewrite reality, that a single thread of sincerity might unravel his years of marital contentment. Instead, her world unraveled. The executive offered her a briefcase of cash, pressed it across a polished mahogany table, and said, "I have a family to protect. You know my wife, my children, they deserve that shield." His tone was cool, detached. "Take this and disappear." Celeste refused at first, clutching his wrist, begging the empty promises of love she half believed. But he withdrew, leaving her trembling with a baby in her womb and her heart broken into fragments. Desperation drove her actions one stormy night. The man confronted her in his study, anger flaring when she threatened to expose him. In the fierce struggle that followed, he fell, struck his head on the edge of a marble bust, and died instantly. Celeste never intended violence. Insisted self-defense when the authorities arrived. But the law treated her momentum as intent. The trial was a media spectacle. Flashbulbs in the courtroom, hushed gossip in ritzy LA galleries, pitying editorials in glossy magazines that once applauded her wardrobe critiques. Ultimately, she was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. 12 years behind prison walls. When parish volunteers escorted a trembling Celeste to the back door of Cypress Hollow, she handed her tiny daughter to Brother Mateo, the monastery's gentle Trinitarian brother. "Her name is Aurelia," Celeste whispered, pressing a locket around the girl's neck. "Tell her only that she was loved. Always loved." Then she stepped away, shoulders straight but tears tracing paths down her porcelain cheeks, never to return. Brother Mateo and the Sisters of St. Agnes adopted Aurelia as their own. In the first months, she refused to eat solid food, learning instead to sip mild broth from a chipped ceramic bowl. Her lullabies were morning chants beneath choir lofts. Her nightlights the flicker of votive candles in the candlelit sanctuary. She learned to tidy the herb gardens, gathering chamomile and lavender for nighttime remedies. By age 8, she could recite Latin prayers as though born to them, yet her eyes always carried a quiet question, a longing for the mother's face she couldn't remember. Despite the monastery's cloistered routine, Aurelia was never lonely. Sister Helena taught her how to sketch the soaring Gothic arches for stained glass windows. while Sister Margaret guided her through basic geometry so she could help rebuild old stone benches in the courtyard. The children of parishioners sometimes came for weekend retreats. Aurelia watched them dart up marble steps and rip down the hallways, laughter echoing off the columns. She envied their ease, their freedom to run and tumble without fear. When she turned 12, Brother Mateo entrusted her with a more solemn task, caring for his personal journal, a battered volume wrapped in burgundy leather, full of his reflections on mercy, forgiveness, and the human capacity to heal. Aurelia learned about compassion not just as an abstract ideal but as daily practice, serving soup to the infirm, reading prayers at dawn, tending the sickly peonies lining the cloister. In its own quiet way, Cypress Hollow shaped her into a woman of extraordinary empathy. By her 16th birthday, Aurelia had become a natural stylist within the monastery's thrift shop boutique, Azalea and Company, which sold donated garments to visiting pilgrims and local students. She discovered a gift for blending old-world fabrics, transforming cast-off linens into flowing tunics and upcycled scarves. Her reputation spread beyond the monastery walls. Church ladies in Charleston sent her lace parasols to repair, mothers asked for petite edits to wedding dresses, even tourists sought her input on which shawl would best flatter their complexion. And yet, at night, she allowed her mind to drift back to those early memories, Madame Celeste's gentle laugh, the hush of that stormy sky when fate intervened, the hollow ache of parting at the prison gates. With each stitch she made, she wove in both her mother's grace and her own resilience. She promised herself she would never forget the woman who sacrificed everything so Aurelia could live. By the time she graduated from the monastery's makeshift academy, where Brother Mateo taught her civics and Sister Helena tutored her in Renaissance art history, Aurelia possessed a rare blend of worldliness and humility. She moved through Charleston's cobbled streets like a silent whisper, her auburn braids swaying behind her. She knew her background invited whispers. The girl with the locket, Celeste's daughter, but she held her head high. After all, she was more than rumor. She was a stylist, a gardener, a confidant to hearts in need, and now, perhaps, the subject of a very different kind of attention. So when Landon Turner first asked whether she'd like a flat white latte, just as the rain tapered off that drizzly evening, she surprised herself by saying yes, because deep down, Aurelia was ready to trade the long shadows of Cypress Hollow for something new, a chance to write her next chapter outside the monastery's moss-cloaked gates. And she wouldn't have to do it alone. The following morning, Savannah's gray skies had cleared, leaving behind a crisp breeze that whispered through Spanish moss. Landon culled on a charcoal fleece jacket and slung a worn canvas backpack over one shoulder. Inside, he'd packed a few bags of coffee beans donated by Spanish moss roasters, along with a pair of sturdy work gloves. Today he would volunteer at Cypress Hollow Monastery, his first real foray into life beyond casebooks and moot court. He drove north along Highway 17, past oak-lined streets and low-slung craft breweries, until the iron gates of Cypress Hollow appeared. The monastery stood on a gentle rise, its stucco walls shaded by ancient live oak. A hand-painted sign welcomed volunteers, hospitality, healing, hope. Landon parked beside a stone fountain, its moss-covered spout still dripping from last night's rain. Brother Mateo greeted him at the gate, robes rustling in the breeze. "Welcome, Mr. Turner," he said with a warm smile. "We're glad to have you." His voice carried the calm authority of someone who had offered counsel to countless souls. Landon nodded, extending the coffee beans. "I thought I'd start with a cafe." Brother Mateo's eyes twinkled. "Excellent choice. Father Ambrose enjoys a strong roast." Inside the monastery's humble cafe, an open room with wooden beams and a tiled floor, Father Ambrose was indeed stirring a steaming pot. He offered Landon a metal scoop. "Coffee is hospitality," he explained, measuring grounds with care. "We serve pilgrims, students, neighbors." Together they brewed a dark, fragrant blend, and Landon inhaled its rich aroma, already feeling the monastery's gentle pace settle into his bones. "Your next task," Father Ambrose said, handing Landon a tray of mugs, "is to carry these out to the cloister garden." Landon stepped through a sun-dappled courtyard, stepping over clusters of purple salvia and white roses. Birds darted among the branches overhead. And there, kneeling beside a patch of newly planted ferns, was Aurelia Hayes. She wore a simple chambray shirt and dark jeans, soil flecking her sleeves. Her auburn braid caught the sunlight, and she hummed softly as she gently patted the earth. Landon paused, heart thundering. He'd caught glimpses of her the night before, through Azalea and Company's rain-spattered window, but seeing her in daylight, focused and serene, felt entirely different. Aurelia looked up, one eyebrow arching in polite curiosity. "Good morning," she said, voice clear as church bells. She rose, brushing soil from her palms. "I'm Aurelia. You must be the new volunteer?" Landon swallowed, suddenly aware of the coffee tray rattling in his hands. "Yes," he managed. "Landon Turner." He stepped forward and offered a mug. "Some coffee? Freshly brewed." Her smile was gentle but guarded, the kind that welcomed kindness while maintaining healthy distance. "That would be lovely. Thank you." She accepted the cup and inhaled deeply, eyes closing for a moment. "It's perfect bold. A little smoky."
I'm glad, Landon replied, relaxing.
"I'm more accustomed to courtroom coffee, harsh and bitter. I thought something smoother would suit a garden." Aurelia laughed. "Soft and musical. You have a knack for observation. This patch of ferns needs shade in the afternoon, or they scorch. You'll find the monastery has plenty of corners needing quiet attention." They set to work together, carrying mugs back and forth. Aurelia introduced him to new plant varieties, Japanese maples, camellias, sweet olive shrubs. She guided his hands as he helped transplant a delicate fern into a shaded nook. Their fingers brushed, and Landon felt a spark of warmth that had nothing to do with the rising sun. As they worked, Aurelia shared stories of her childhood here, playing hide-and-seek among the ancient stone pillars, learning to sketch the monastery's rose window with Sister Helena, following Brother Mateo on butterfly-watching walks at dusk. Her words painted a vivid tapestry of belonging and resilience, a world Landon had never known. In turn, Landon spoke of his life in Savannah, studying law at the university, weekend bicycle rides along Forsyth Park, late-night debates with Jax and River. He confessed his surprise at finding a place so removed from deadlines and legal briefs, a place where each sunrise felt like a promise. By midday, the garden bloomed with renewed vibrancy. Landon looked at his watch. Nearly 3 hours had passed. He felt a rare sense of calm, as though the monastery's quiet rhythms had seeped into him. He handed Aurelia the last mug. "Thank you for guiding me." Aurelia's dark green eyes held his gaze. "Thank you for the coffee and for showing up." She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Not many come here expecting to get their hands dirty." He grinned, chest light. "I'll take that as a compliment." They stood among ferns and roses, the monastery silent except for humming bees and distant chanting. Landon felt the world narrow to this moment. Two people in a hidden garden, learning each other's stories one careful gesture at a time. And in that first encounter, beyond the challenge or the New Orleans dare, Landon discovered something unexpected. A connection worth cultivating far more than any bet. From dawn to dusk, the days that followed felt like a waking dream for both of them. Each morning, Landon drove the winding road out of Savannah and past the Spanish moss, draped oaks until he reached the gentle slope of Cypress Hollow. He would park his car by the stone fountain near the entry gate, where moss glistened with dew, and step into the hush of monastery life. There, Aurelia was already at work in the courtyard garden, her auburn braids swinging behind her as she knelt among ferns, whispering to the soil. Landon joined her without a word, offering her the new sack of beans he had brought from Spanish moss roasters. She accepted it with a warm smile, and together they carried heavy burlap sacks through the archway to Father Ambrose's small cafe. The ritual of brewing coffee, measuring grounds precisely, Pouring hot water in concentric circles became their daily ceremony. They lingered over dusky mugs in that sunlit room, talking quietly about favorite books, childhood memories, and aspirations beyond the monastery walls. Landon learned that Aurelia had sketched Gothic cathedrals by the light of votive candles, dreaming of design school, while she discovered that he had once argued complex legal cases in a moot court championship, only to feel that something essential was missing from his well-ordered life. By the third morning, their easy collaboration felt less like volunteer work and more like shared discovery. In the garden, Landon handed her a bundle of freshly pruned camellia branches. She traced a finger along the delicate blossoms and said, "You have a gentle touch with plants." He laughed, brushing dirt from the back of his hand. "I'm more comfortable drafting briefs than digging soil, but I'm learning." That evening, a sudden afternoon storm rolled in over town. Thunder rumbled as they hurried beneath a broad oak, raindrops pattering on leaves overhead. Landon offered her his faded patchwork umbrella, and she accepted, draping her slender frame against a side. In the dimming light, surrounded by the scent of wet earth and incense from the chapel, he found the courage to confess what had stirred in him since their first tentative meeting. "Aurelia, I never meant for this to be about a dare," he said, voice low. "I came here hoping to prove something to my friends, but I've gained something far more precious." She looked up at him, rain dripping from her eyelashes. "I never asked you to prove anything," she replied. "I only wished to share this place, these quiet moments, with someone who cared." As thunder rolled overhead, their hands found each other's, and their first kiss was gentle, urgent, as though sealing a promise neither fully understood, but both were eager to keep. By Friday, the gentle tension of budding affection had woven itself into the monastery's daily rhythm. Volunteers whispered over morning teas, Sister Margaret offered Landon an approving nod, and Brother Mateo blessed the pair with a knowing smile. Late that afternoon, Landon surprised Aurelia with an invitation, lunch at a cafe in downtown Savannah. Over shrimp and grits and sweet tea refills, they strolled brick sidewalks heavy with jasmine scent, their conversation effortless and full of laughter. When his friends pinged him with teasing texts about New Orleans, he simply slipped his phone into his pocket, intent only on the woman beside him. When Saturday morning arrived, Landon arrived at Cypress Hollow earlier than usual. The sunrise painted the cloister walls gold, and he found Aurelia in the herb garden, carefully labeling rows of lavender and rosemary. He knelt beside her, pulling a small sprig of lavender and tucking it behind her ear. She laughed, brushing a fingertip against his cheek. "You're such a charmer," she teased, and he felt, for the first time, that the dare had become irrelevant. That afternoon, they sat beneath the monastery's ancient oak, watching a pair of mockingbirds dart between branches. Landon felt compelled to speak his truth unguarded. "Aurelia, when I first agreed to help you carry coffee trays, I thought it would be a simple favor. Instead, I've discovered more about myself than I ever could in a courtroom. You've shown me what it means to invest in small things, soil, seeds, moments, and to care without reservation." He paused, searching her green eyes. "I care about you." She reached for his hand, squeezing gently. "I care about you too." No words more profound were needed as they leaned into each other, the monastery's bells tolling softly in the distance. By Sunday, rumors of their closeness had spread even to Savannah streets. Visitors to Azalea and Company quietly complimented Aurelia's brighter smile and asked after her volunteer companion. When Landon arrived at her boutique that morning, she surprised him by showing him a half-finished dress on a mannequin, a design inspired by the chapel's rose window. "I wanted to share my world in return," she said. He studied the intricate lace overlays and soft silk folds. "It's beautiful, just like you." That evening, Landon walked Aurelia back to Cypress Hollow under a violet sky. Soft lantern light glowed in parlor windows. He paused at the gate, hesitating before leaning close. "This week was never about coffee dates or New Orleans," he murmured, thumb brushing her wrist. "It was about finding you." Aurelia's breath caught in her throat. "And I found you." She smiled, and he pressed his forehead to hers. A breeze rustled the moss above, and for a moment, the world felt both immense and exquisitely small, distilled to the two of them and their shared promise. In that single, unbroken week, friendship had unfurled into love, quiet, steadfast, and unafraid. What began as a playful challenge ended as the most meaningful journey either had ever taken. And as the first stars blinked to life above Cypress Hollow, they knew their story was only just beginning. The weekend that followed brought a new storm, not of thunder and rain, but of whispered doubts and quiet judgments that threatened to uproot the tender bond Landon and Aurelia had cultivated. Word of their closeness traveled swiftly through Cypress Hollow's cloistered halls. Volunteers noticed Landon lingering too long by the air garden. Nuns saw Aurelia laughing at something in his eyes. And parishioners remarked on the stolen glances they shared beneath ancient oaks. The monastery's gentle rhythms clashed with an undercurrent of unease, as if unseen eyes weighed their every step. Late Monday morning, as Landon guided a wheelbarrow piled high with flowering azaleas toward the chapel entrance, he felt the chill of disapproval mount behind him. Sister Margaret, the kindly woman who once smiled at his eager willingness, stood at the doorway, arms folded beneath her gray habit. Her eyes, usually soft, held a flicker of concern. "Mr. Turner," she said quietly, "I trust you understand the monastery's traditions." He paused, heart-thumping. "I do," he replied, setting down the wheelbarrow. "I respect this place more than anywhere I've known." Her gaze met his. Monastic grounds are meant for prayer and healing, not worldly attachments. Before Landon could answer, Aurelia emerged from the parlor with a trowel in hand. She caught sight of Sister Margaret and faltered, the sunken curve of her lips betraying hurt. "Something you wish to discuss, sister?" she asked evenly. The nun gave a curt nod, then turned away, her embroidered scapular rustling as she walked back inside. Aurelia stared after her, shoulders tightening. Landon stepped beside her and placed a gentle hand on her arm. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "They don't understand us yet." She shook her head, wiping soil from her hands. "Maybe they never will," she whispered. That afternoon, they sought solace among the old stone benches set under gnarled cypress limbs. Landon offered her a notebook he'd borrowed from Brother Mateo, a sketchbook she often used to design her next clothing upcycles. She opened it to a blank page and drew a single twig of lavender, its petals quivering in violet grace. Then she sketched two entwined hearts, half hidden behind flowing skirts. "They see me as a child of the convent," she said, voice soft. "And you belong to the mayor's family. To them, we're worlds apart." Landon knelt beside her on the flagstones. "I don't believe in their worlds," he said firmly. "I believe in ours." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "My mother has doubts, too. She saw you at Azalea and Company, said it wasn't proper, that I'm risking too much." Aurelia's brow furrowed. "All I ever wanted was to repay the monastery for saving me. And now I feel I failed you in return." Landon smiled, lifting her hand. "You've given me more than I ever dared hope for. Don't let their fear become yours." The next morning, Landon braced himself for another wave of scrutiny when he arrived at the monastery's main gate. But instead of Sister Margaret, he found Mayor Whitaker's wife, Margaret Whitaker, dressed in a tailored coat and silk scarf, standing under the wrought iron arch. Aurelia lingered by the herb beds, her expression tense when she saw the woman approach. "Mr. Turner," Mrs. Whitaker began, her voice cool, precise. She offered a measured nod to Aurelia. "Your relationship with my son, it's unconventional. Cypress Hollow is a sacred space. People come here to bury their pains, not to roll them into new entanglements. I've seen the way you two linger by the rose garden, whispering, giggling after the sun has set. My son is 30. I expect him to marry within his sphere, not flit off into a life that could ruin his reputation." Aurelia's eyes widened, hurt flaring. Landon stepped forward, chin raised. "Mrs. Whitaker, with all due respect, your son's happiness matters more than any reputation." Mrs. Whittaker's lips pressed thin. Happiness built on shaky ground can collapse under the weight of public opinion. She turned to Aurelia. And you, my son comes here seeking sanctuary, and you give him questions. Are you even free to accept a life outside these walls? Do you truly understand what you're asking of him? Without waiting for an answer, she swept off, leaving a brittle tension in her wake. Aurelia's hands trembled as she leaned against the rosemary hedge. I never asked for the spotlight, she said, voice raw. I'm just trying to live the life I choose. Landon closed the distance between them and gathered her in his arms. Then we'll walk that life together, he said. No matter what they say. Word of Mrs. Whittaker's visit traveled quickly through the volunteer network. Jax and River learned of it when Landon stepped out of the chapel that afternoon, shoulders set with resolve. They really didn't let up, did they? Jax asked, voice low. Landon shook his head.
No.
But I won't back down. Jax clapped him on the back. We've got your back. By Thursday, the couple found themselves under siege from every angle. Gossipy glances at Sunday services, concerned whispers from townsfolk at the local market. Even the occasional scathing headline in the community newsletter. Mayor's son seen at monastery. Love or plot? Landon's colleagues at the law firm offered half-hearted sympathies, while helpful mentors cautioned him about rocking the boat. Aurelia's donors to Azalea and Company called to ask if she would be stepping away from public appearances. Late that night, as cicadas thrummed in the humid air, they met beneath the weeping willow near the monastery's old well. Aurelia's eyes shimmered with tears. I want to be strong, she said, voice breaking, but I feel everyone's disapproval pressing in. Landon held her close. Lean on me, he whispered. You've shown me what it means to have real courage. Now let me protect that. He brushed a lock of hair from her face. I love you. Their opinions don't change that. At dawn on Friday, Landon made a decision. He would speak to Mrs. Whittaker, directly and respectfully. He had no illusions of winning a mother-in-law's full approval, but he would stand before her and declare his intentions plainly. Likewise, Aurelia decided she would extend a gesture of peace towards Sister Margaret and Brother Mateo, inviting them to share tea and conversation in the parlor. They would show the community that their love was not some fleeting fancy, but a bond worth defending. Pressure and prejudice had tested them, threatening to sever what they had built. Yet under the surface of doubt, their commitment deepened. In the earliest hours of Saturday, they stood side by side in the monastery courtyard, hands entwined. The sky was pastel pink, a promise of calm after the storm. As they faced the day's challenges anew, neither felt helpless. United, Landon and Aurelia discovered that love, when forged in quiet strength and tender resolve, could rise above every whispering trial. They would carry each other forward, past prejudice, beyond convention, toward whatever grace awaited beyond Cypress Hollow's mossy gates. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the air tinged with salt from distant tides and the promise of a new chapter. Aurelia had risen before the monastery bell, slipped into her chambray shirt, and made her way to the greenhouse to check on seedlings. Landon arrived moments later, his dark hair still damp from a quick shower, carrying 2 steaming mugs of vanilla spice coffee. He handed one to her without a word, their shared ritual comforting against the tension that lingered after Mrs. Whittaker's stern warning. They sat amid young jasmine vines, where pale flowers quivered in the breeze. Landon aimed to lighten the mood. I consulted Father Ambrose, he said softly. He says your lavender and my stubbornness make a potent mix. Aurelia managed a half-smile, easing the tight knot in her chest. The joke would have felt trite any other week, but today it served as a fragile bridge between them. Before they could savor another sip, Landon's phone buzzed insistently. He checked the screen. Margaret Whittaker calling. His jaw tightened. That's my mother. Aurelia nodded, eyes steady. You need to take it. He tapped accept. Mother, he began, voice polite but guarded. Across the line, Margaret Whittaker's cool tone crackled. I understand you've continued your volunteer work at Cypress Hollow, she said. and that Aurelia has invited you into her world. Landon braced himself. Yes, mother. There was a pause. Then she continued. We need to talk face to face. Her words landed like a summons. I'll come to the monastery in an hour. The line went dead. Landon exhaled, placing the phone on a mossy bench. Aurelia stood, brushing her palms on her jeans. Do you want me there? She asked quietly.
He took her hand.
Only if you want me there. Aurelia nodded. Together they walked up the ivy-clad steps towards Sister Margaret's quarters, an elegant chamber that doubled as administrative office. Through the leaded glass, they saw Sister Margaret, arms folded, eyes focused on the pathway. Behind her, pale morning light glowed across rows of ledgers and prayer books. The door opened before they could knock. Mr. Turner, Miss Hayes. Sister Margaret greeted them in measured tones. Please come in. Mrs. Whittaker has requested this meeting. She gestured toward a velvet-upholstered settee. Aurelia and Landon sat side by side, shoulders brushing in silent support. Moments later, the door cracked open and Margaret Whittaker entered. She wore a tailored navy coat over a silk blouse. Her platinum hair swept back in a severe chignon. Her heels clicked on the flagstone floor as she approached. Landon rose. Mother. Aurelia remained standing, hands clasped at her waist. Margaret offered only a curt nod. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Sister Margaret. She turned to the nun. I believe this setting is neutral. Sister Margaret inclined her head. Yes, Mrs. Whittaker. You have the floor. Margaret Whittaker softened her posture for the first time since they'd met. Landon, Aurelia, she began, voice calm but resolute. I've spent the past days wrestling with my concerns. I see how happy you both appear, but happiness built on broken expectations can crumble under scrutiny. She looked at Aurelia. You were raised here, sheltered by prayers and routines. Your world has boundaries, ones that I respect. Landon, your world is public life, city politics. A mayor's family stands in the spotlight.
She paused.
I fear that clash will destroy you, both of you. Aurelia's chest tightened. She stepped forward. Mrs. Whittaker, I'm not sheltered. I've faced my mother's mistakes. Learned to care for the sick, manage the garden, run Azalea and company. I'm not naive. She reached for Landon's hand. And I know what I want. We want to build a life together, one rooted in what we've nurtured here. Margaret Whittaker's gaze shifted between them. I read your designs, she said to Aurelia. You have real talent. But ambitions and marriages are different things. She turned to Landon. And you, are you prepared to give up the path you've chosen? Your legal career, your reputation, the legacy of the Whittaker name. Landon stood, heart anchoring his voice. Mother, I have chosen Aurelia. Not as a whim, not because of a dare, but because our lives have intertwined in ways I never expected. My career can adapt. My reputation, if it means living honestly with someone I love, can evolve. Margaret shook her head slowly. You speak like a man in love, noble, but blind to consequences. She turned back to Aurelia. And you, Miss Hayes, do you truly grasp what you ask of this young man? He is the son of a public figure. If your past ever resurfaces, or if questions about your family's history arise, his public standing will suffer. Aurelia squared her shoulders. My past is part of me. I refuse to hide or be ashamed of it. I will stand by his side as he stands by mine. Tears gleamed in her eyes, but her voice held steady. We face challenges every day, caring for the sick, feeding the hungry, rebuilding broken lives. We know what sacrifice means. Silence stretched. Margaret Whittaker's shoulders slumped, as though the weight of their determination had finally reached her. She lifted a hand to her chest. You are both remarkably stubborn, she said, almost to herself. Then she faced Landon. I only want what's best for you. If you find a way to honor both your love and your duties, then, she closed her eyes briefly. Then I will support you. She turned to Aurelia and extended her hand. I apologize for my harshness. Aurelia accepted the handshake, relief flooding her features. Sister Margaret moved to pour tea, offering delicate china cups. Landon poured for Margaret Whittaker, then for Aurelia, in a gesture of newfound harmony. As they sipped, the tension that had skyrocketed in the monastery gardens began to dissolve, replaced by cautious hope. Margaret Whittaker spoke of her own struggles as a wife and mother under public scrutiny. Moments of fear when she worried for her son's happiness. Aurelia shared her mother's watercolor prison blooms, a testament to beauty flourishing under impossible circumstances. Landon recounted their days cultivating coffee and clay, verse by verse revealing the steady foundation their love had built. By the end of the tea, walls had shifted. Margaret Whittaker rose and embraced her son. "Go build your life," she said, voice thick. Then she turned to Aurelia, placing her hand softly on the young woman's shoulder. "I see now why he loves you." Outside, spring sunshine broke through the clouds, illuminating Cypress Hollow in a brilliant glow. Landon and Aurelia walked back to the courtyard, Margaret Whittaker at their side. Their steps were unhurried, their hearts buoyed by the fragile promise that family, once fractured by doubt, could mend itself through empathy and honest conversation. In that single, decisive meeting, love's quiet insistence had met the sternest of objections, and won. The path ahead would still hold challenges, but they would face them together, emboldened by the knowledge that permission to love could be earned with courage, truth, and a willingness to confront even a mother's fiercest doubts. The Monday after Margaret Whittaker's visit dawned with an almost magical stillness over Savannah. Golden sunlight spilled across the Cypress Hollow grounds, illuminating dew-speckled cobblestones and the fluttering petals of early jasmine. Landon arrived just as the monastery bell rang, stepping from his car with a hopeful calm. Today felt different, like the steady breath before a plunge into the deep. Aurelia met him at the glass greenhouse, her sketchbook tucked under one arm. She led him inside, where the air was thick with the scent of jasmine, mint, and damp earth. "I called Mercy Hospital," she said, voice bright with a mix of fear and excitement. "They squeezed us in this afternoon." She opened her sketchbook, not to reveal gardens or designs, but a single, bold word written in Aurelia's precise hand. 8 weeks. Landon's pulse quickened. He crossed the small distance and placed a hand on her shoulder. 8 weeks, he breathed. That's incredible. Aurelia's cheeks flushed with relief and pride. "I did the at-home test this morning, and then another one to be sure. Then I called Mercy." They held hands in the humid greenhouse as the gravity of the moment settled in. For weeks they had lived under a canopy of whispered doubts and whispered encouragements alike. Now at last proof, a life growing between them. That afternoon, they arrived at Mercy Hospital in a rush of bright corridors and professional efficiency. A nervous receptionist confirmed their appointment and handed Aurelia a patient wristband. Landon stayed close, offering steady support as they settled into the ultrasound suite, an intimate room lit by a single lamp beside a large monitor and bed. Their obstetrician, Dr. Hernandez, entered with a warm smile. She had heard Aurelia's voice on the phone, calm, precise, determined, and she greeted them like old friends. "Congratulations," she said, scanning Aurelia's wristband. "Let's see if we can find that little heartbeat." Aurelia lay back on the exam table, eyes on Landon's as he knelt beside her. Dr. Hernandez applied warm gel to Aurelia's abdomen, placing the wand gently against her skin. The room held its breath. On the monitor, a fuzzy, grainy shape emerged, a tiny form no larger than a grape. And then, thump, thump, thump. The soft, steady thudding of new life pulsed across the screen. Landon's hand flew to his mouth to stifle a sob of wonder. Aurelia's eyes brimmed with tears, a hand pressing to her heart. "There it is, Dr. Hernandez murmured, her voice damp with the same awe. 8 weeks, perfectly on schedule. Everything looks healthy." For a moment, the outside world, the monastery's doubts, the mayor's scrutiny, the weight of past mistakes, all fell away. In that small room, it was just Landon, Aurelia, and their child. But as they left the hospital, a new shadow whispered at the edges of their joy. Dr. Hernandez stepped out to speak privately with Aurelia. Landon waited in the hallway, pacing, heart still pounding from the ultrasound. When she emerged, Aurelia's face had sobered. Landon took her arm. What did she say? Aurelia forced a small smile. Baby's fine for now. But my blood pressure's a little high. She wants me to rest, come back in 2 days for a follow-up. No heavy lifting, no volunteering in the garden, at least for the next few weeks. Relief mingled with concern. Of course, Landon said. Whatever you need. He lowered his voice. You scared me for a second. Aurelia squeezed his hand. I'm okay. It's just an extra precaution. She bit her lip, eyes drifting toward Mercy's pale green walls. I know I agreed to face challenges. I didn't expect them so soon. That evening, they returned to Cypress Hollow under a bruised pink sky. The monastery's ancient oaks cast long shadows over the brick paths. Aurelia moved slowly, Landon at her side, carrying her bag and umbrellas. When they reached the courtyard garden, he helped her settle onto a stone bench beneath a canopy of moss-draped limbs. Father Ambrose found them there, his linen cassock soft as candlelight. He carried a tray with 2 cups of chamomile tea, its warmth promising rest. Congratulations, he said gently, handing Aurelia a cup. And please take care. A mother's well-being is the first gift she gives her child. Aurelia nodded, sipping the tea. Landon sat close, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. The world felt both vast and small. The monastery walls enclosing them, the new life expanding before them. But dawn brought word that tested their renewed serenity. A volunteer on the front desk recognized Aurelia's name and had quietly asked about her personal situation. Rumors of pregnant nun's daughter and mayor's son expecting began to swirl through volunteers who had never known about Dr. Hernandez's precautionary warning. By Tuesday morning, Sister Margaret confronted them again, this time with a different tone. She looked tired, torn between her duty and her compassion. Miss Hayes, she said, voice trembling slightly. I've heard there are complications. Blood pressure, possible early risk. Aurelia met her gaze, determined.
Yes.
Dr. Hernandez advised rest. Sister Margaret sighed, stepping aside. If you need privacy, I understand. But the community is concerned. Would you consider our guest cottage, so people aren't watching? Aurelia's jaw clenched. She met Landon's eyes, and he stood. We're not hiding, he said firmly. We just need time. For her safety. The nun nodded slowly. Of course. And the whispers followed them as they walked away. That afternoon, Landon decided to take Aurelia to the coast, Edisto Island, where their breath could mingle with salty wind and the roar of waves. She rested under an umbrella on a pale driftwood bench, feet on warm sand, as he returned from a small deli with shrimp salad sandwiches. They ate in companionable silence, gazing at the horizon. Thank you, Aurelia said, voice soft as foam at the surf's edge. For making me feel safe. Landon sat beside her, handing her a sandwich. I can't promise you calm seas, he admitted, but I promise I won't let you drift alone. She leaned against him, tears shining. I love you, she whispered. And I love you, he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. They returned to Savannah slower than they left, the drive stretching out like a prayer. By Wednesday, Aurelia's rest, prescribed by Dr. Hernandez, meant giving up her greenhouse duties and relying on volunteers to care for her beloved seedlings. Landon picked up extra shifts at the cafe, then sat by her side in the guest cottage as she sketched new designs for Azalea and Company's spring line, utterly dreamy garments inspired by sunrise petals and moonlit ferns. At the monastery's weekly prayer vigil on Thursday, the community gathered beneath lantern-lit eaves. Bishop Franklin, officiating, noticed Landon standing vigil with Aurelia, her hand on his arm. He paused mid-chant, then placed a steady palm on Landon's shoulder. In a quiet voice audible only to them, he said, Love forged in trial is love that lasts. Hope blossomed again. If the bishop could see their bond as sacred, then prejudice and precaution might soften in time. On Friday afternoon, Dr. Hernandez cleared Aurelia for gentle gardening. Landon and Aurelia returned to the courtyard, planting a protective circle of rosemary around the rose window, symbolizing remembrance and fidelity. As they pressed saplings into the earth, the monastery bell tolled 5 times. Aurelia rested her head on Landon's shoulder.
"We did it," she said.
We turned a challenge into joy. Landon brushed a lock of hair from her forehead. This is only the beginning. Tomorrow, the sun will rise and we'll face whatever comes next together. Between the azaleas and the ferns, under watchful oaks, they planted their faith in each other. The turning point had arrived, good news tempered by new trials, but they had discovered the true measure of love, tending it with patience, courage, and unwavering devotion. No matter the storm on the horizon, spring deepened into summer, and with each passing day, the promise of new life at Cypress Hollow and beyond unfolded in gentle shades of green. Aurelia's rounded belly grew steadily, marked by soft stretches and moments of quiet awe. Landon never left her side, his hand pressed to her abdomen as they walked through the rose garden at dawn, savoring the first flush of morning light. The community that had once watched them warily began to rally around the couple in surprising ways. Sister Margaret, whose doubts had once chilled their hearts, arrived one morning with a basket of chamomile and lavender sachets, handcrafted reminders of the herb garden's healing powers. "For your dreams," she said, smiling. Brother Mateo offered Aurelia a small silver cross to wear at the hospital, a symbol of faith and protection. Even Margaret Whittaker, having witnessed the strength of their love and Aurelia's gentle resolve, dropped by Azalea and company with fresh peaches from her own orchard. Alongside an envelope containing a check to help with baby's first layette, she insisted. Their wedding took place in the monastery's cloister, beneath a canopy of white wisteria. The path was lined with peony petals and lanterns strung from the ancient oaks. Aurelia wore a gown she had designed herself, soft ivory silk layered with lace shaped like monastery rose windows, and Landon stood at the altar in a navy linen suit that felt as comfortable as an old promise. When Margaret Whittaker gave Aurelia away, her eyes glistened with tears, and she pressed a kiss to Aurelia's temple, whispering, "You've made our family richer." As they exchanged vows, the late afternoon sun filtered through stained glass like spilled gemstones. The assembled guests, nuns, parishioners, friends from Savannah, and even Jax and River, witnessed a love that had weathered every storm, cast its roots deep enough to flourish. When Landon slipped the simple silver band onto Aurelia's finger, she felt the weight of his commitment settle around her heart like a warm embrace. Their reception was held on the monastery lawn beneath strings of Edison bulbs. Local chefs from Savannah brought buttermilk biscuits and shrimp étouffée, wine flowed freely, and laughter rose like summer cicadas. Aurelia and Landon danced barefoot on the grass to string quartet's soft rendition of Moon River. As they swayed, she realized she had never felt so grounded, centered in a world that once threatened to pull them apart. In the weeks after their wedding, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Aurelia's afternoon rests became short escapes to dream of the baby's first cradle, while Landon handled morning coffee runs and quiet afternoons repairing the greenhouse. They converted the monastery's old guest cottage into a cozy nursery, pale seafoam walls, a burlap rug they'd stitched themselves, and above the crib, mobile birds fashioned from driftwood and lace fluttered on a gentle breeze. Weekdays found them teaching at the monastery's volunteer program. Aurelia led sewing workshops for young women learning trades, while Landon offered pro bono legal clinics for small farms and family-run businesses. Together, they extended Cypress Hollow's ethos of compassion beyond its walls. In the evenings, they shared dinners in the cottage kitchen, homegrown tomatoes stirred into pasta, fresh bread still warm from Sister Helena's stove. Golden light pooled through lace curtains as they leaned across the table, hands entwined. Their conversation ranging from design sketches to municipal zoning laws. One late August afternoon, at exactly 39 weeks pregnant, Aurelia felt the first unmistakable twinge of labor. Landon, ever steady, packed their hospital bag with practiced calm, extra blankets, her favorite books, and that silver cross from Brother Mateo tucked inside her robe. They arrived at Mercy Hospital just as the sun set in a blaze of pink and gold, matching the warm hues of the monastery gardens. Aurelia's contractions came in measured waves. Landon held her hand through each one, murmuring encouragement and brushing damp strands of hair from her flushed forehead. Hours passed in a quiet mix of pain and anticipation, punctuated by Dr. Hernandez's gentle guidance. At 3:07 a.m., after a final push beneath fluorescent lights and the soft murmur of a city that never truly sleeps, Aurelia cried out as their daughter arrived, her first breath mingling with Landon's joyous tears. The newborn let out a tiny wail, and then, miracle of miracles, fell quiet in Aurelia's arms. At 6 pounds and 4 ounces. She blinked up at them through lashes, so fine they glimmered like morning mist. When Landon whispered, "Hello, little one," the baby's fingertips curled around his pinky. Aurelia, exhausted but radiant, traced the soft curve of her daughter's cheek. They named her Magnolia Grace, after the trees under which they first found solace, and for the quiet grace that had carried them through every obstacle. Returning to Cypress Hollow in the soft light of dawn, the new family of 3 was met by a chorus of church bells, their gentle peals echoing across dew-damp lawns. Sister Margaret had organized a small blessing ceremony, volunteers holding tea candles, the nuns gathering in the cloister's stone archways. As Magnolia slept in Aurelia's arms, Brother Mateo sprinkled holy water, sourced from the monastery's well, across her tiny forehead. "May you grow strong in love," he intoned. Back in the guest cottage nursery, Aurelia and Landon unpacked the stack of hand-me-down blankets, each stitch a token of community care. Margaret Whittaker arrived with a basket of fresh peaches. Madame Celeste Duval's prison blooms transformed into a vibrant watercolor on the nursery wall, and Jax presented a tiny wooden mobile carved with Savannah's skyline. Everyone brought gifts woven from their lives and labor, celebrating not just the child but the resilience of a love that had transcended every boundary. In the months that followed, Magnolia Grace became a fixture at the monastery's early morning services, her coos blending with the soft chant of the choir. Landon taught her to crawl on the rose-petal carpet by the chapel doors, and Aurelia clasped delicate fingers around Magnolia's tiny hands, guiding her first steps among lavender beds. They captured every milestone, her smile at the sunrise, her astonished gaze at monarch butterflies in the herb garden, her peals of laughter echoing through cloistered arches. On Sundays, the Whittakers joined them for family brunch at Spanish Moss Roasters. Mayor Whittaker sat beside his wife, beaming down at Aurelia and Magnolia as Landon helped them share pancakes dusted with Savannah pecans. Public photos, once feared as potential scandals, now appeared as heartwarming features in community newsletters. "Monastery Miracle Baby," proclaimed one headline beneath a photo of Aurelia cradling Magnolia in the cloister garden. As Magnolia turned 1, Landon and Aurelia organized a celebration beneath the wisteria for family and friends. Strings of lanterns twisted through the branches, hummingbirds darted among white hydrangeas, and children chased each other across dew-kissed grass. They toasted Magnolia's first year with peach cider and blueberry tarts, and Landon lifted his daughter into the air, her giggles ringing like sunlit bells. That evening, as the sun dipped below Savannah's skyline, Landon and Aurelia sat on their cottage porch swing, Magnolia nestled between them. They watched fireflies flicker in the darkening garden, their lights dancing among the roses and ferns they had planted together. Aurelia leaned her head on Landon's shoulder. "I can't believe how far we've come." He kissed her temple. "From dares to devotion." She smiled, lifting Magnolia's chubby hand to wave at the fireflies. "From new beginnings to happy ever after." Landon wrapped his arms around both his greatest treasures, and every moment in between. Above them, the stars blinked on like 1,000 hopeful candles, illuminating the monastery's ancient walls. For Landon, Aurelia, and Magnolia Grace, the journey that began with a simple dare had blossomed into a life of shared wonders, quiet courage, and enduring joy. And in the embrace of Cypress Hollow, where love had weathered doubt and prejudice, they discovered that the true happy ending was the promise of every new tomorrow they would greet together. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.